live. Alright, this is Twilight Chapter 9. It is titled Theory. Throughout this video, you will see me with this shot glass as I will be drinking some sake to enjoy our Saturday. So, just before anybody asks. Alright, Chapter 9. Theory. Can I ask just one more? I pleaded as Edward accelerated much too quickly down the quiet street. He didn't seem to be paying any attention to the road. He sighed. One. He agreed, his lips pressed together in a cautious line. Well, you said you knew I hadn't gone into the bookstore, and that I had gone south. I was just wondering how you knew that. He already explained that. He literally just explained that in the last, 2 paragraphs.
Well, you know what would be funny, though? If he was like, your days were numbered the day you met me, and he just careens off the road.
He just flies off the bridge.
Yeah.
He looked away, deliberating. I thought we were past all the evasiveness, I grumbled. He almost smiled. Fine. I followed your scent. That's what every lady wants to hear. You smell bad.
You stank.
You stank so bad. He looked at the road, giving me time to compose my face. I couldn't think of an acceptable response to that, but I filed it carefully away for future study, and I tried to refocus. I wasn't ready to let him be finished now that I was finally explaining things. And you didn't answer one of my first questions, I stalled. He looked at me with disapproval. Which one? How does it work? The mind-reading thing. Can you read anybody's mind, anywhere? How do you do it? Can the rest of your family? I felt silly asking for clarification on make-believe things. That's more than one, he pointed out. I simply intertwined my fingers and gazed at him, waiting. No, it's just me. And I can't hear anyone anywhere. I have to be fairly close. The more familiar someone's voice is, the farther away I can hear them, but still no more than a few miles. He paused thoughtfully. It's a little like being in a huge hall filled with people, everyone talking at once. It's just a hum, a buzzing of voices in the background until I focus on one voice, and then that's what they're thinking is clear. Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. Most of the time I tune it all out. It can be very distracting. And then it's easier to seem normal. He frowned as he said the word. When I'm not accidentally answering someone's thoughts rather than their words, anyway. Why do you think it is that you can't hear me? I asked curiously. He looked at me, his eyes enigmatic. I don't know, he murmured. The only guess I have is that maybe your mind doesn't work the same as the rest of theirs do. You're not like other girls, Bella.
She's not like other people.
Like your thoughts are on the AM frequency and I'm only getting FM. He grinned at me, suddenly amused. My mind doesn't work right? I'm a freak? The words bothered me more than they should, probably because his speculation hit home. I'd always suspected as much, and it embarrassed me to have it confirmed. I hear voices in my mind and you're worried that you're the freak, he laughed. Don't worry, it's just a theory. His face tightened.
Theory.
Which brings us back to you. I sighed. How to begin? Aren't we past all the evasions now? He reminded me softly. I looked at his face for the first time, trying to find words. I happened to notice the speedometer. Holy crow! I shouted. Slow down! What's wrong? He was startled, but the car didn't decelerate. You're going 100 miles an hour! I was still shouting. I shot a panicked glance at the window, but it was too dark to see much. The road was only visible in the long patch of bluish brightness from the headlights. I don't see how being a vampire gets you out of, getting tickets all the time. Because all we hear about is him running lights, running stop signs, doing over 100 everywhere.
Yeah, you can't just do that and not get pulled over.
Your car isn't invisible.
It's one thing for him to use his vampire gaze to get out of, the repercussions, but you'd still get pulled over.
Yeah. Relax, Bella. He rolled his eyes, still not slowing. Are you trying to kill us? We're not going to crash. I tried to modulate my voice. Why are you in such a hurry? I always drive like this. He turned to smile crookedly. Keep your eyes on the road.
Hey, being a vampire, wouldn't it make you a better driver?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, if he was there since the invention of the car. But, I don't know. I've never been in an accident, Bella. I've never even gotten a ticket. He grinned and tapped his forehead. Built-in radar detector. He knows when they come. But if you're doing 100 and you can only hear him within a few miles, that's not going to be enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, very funny, I fumed. Charlie's a cop, remember? I was raised to abide by traffic laws. Besides, if you turn us into a Volvo pretzel around a tree trunk, you could probably just walk away. Probably. He agreed with a short laugh, but you can't. He sighed, and I watched with relief as the needle gradually drifted towards 80. Happy? Almost.
No.
I hate driving slow. This is slow? Enough commentary on my driving, he snapped. I'm still waiting for your latest theory. I bit my lip. He looked down at me, his honey eyes unexpectedly gentle. I won't laugh, he promised. I'm more afraid that you'll be angry with me.
I mean, that's what he said last time.
Yeah.
He was like, haha, that's stupid, Bella.
Is it that bad? Pretty much, yeah. He waited. I was looking down at my hand so I couldn't see his expression. Go ahead. His voice was calm. I don't know how to start, I admitted. Why don't you start at the beginning? You said you didn't come up with this on your own. No. What got you started? A book? A movie? He probed. No. It was Saturday. At the beach. I risked a glance up at his face. He looked puzzled. I ran into an old family friend, Jacob Black, I continued. His dad and Charlie have been friends since I was a baby. He still looked confused. His dad is one of the cool elders. I watched him carefully. His confused expression froze in place. We went for a walk. I edited all my scheming out of the story. This is so drawn out. And he was telling me some old legends, trying to scare me, I think. And he told me, one, I hesitated. Go on, he said, same. About vampires. I realized I was whispering. I couldn't look at his face, but I saw his knuckles tighten on the wheel. And you immediately thought of me, he asked, still calm. No, he mentioned your family. He was silent, staring at the road.
You could be endangering Jacob's 15-year-old life.
Rest in peace, Jacob. I was suddenly worried about protecting Jacob. He just thought it was a silly superstition, I said quickly. He didn't expect me to think anything of it. It didn't seem like enough. I had to confess. It was my fault. I forced him to tell me. Why? Lauren said something about you. She was trying to provoke me, and an older boy from the tribe said your family didn't come to the reservation. Only it sounded like he meant something different. So I got Jacob alone and I tricked it out of him, I admitted, hanging my head. He startled me by laughing. I glared up at him. He was still laughing. But his eyes were fierce, staring ahead. Tricked him how? He asked. I tried to flirt. It worked better than I thought it would. Disbelief colored my tone as I remembered. I'd like to have seen that. He chuckled darkly.
Edward, confirmed.
And you accused me of dazzling people. Poor Jacob Black. I blushed and looked out the window into the night. What did you do then? He asked after a minute. I did some research on the internet. And did that convince you? His voice sounded barely interested, but his hands were clamped hard on the steering wheel. No, nothing fit. Most of it was silly, and then I stopped. What? I decided it didn't matter, I whispered. It didn't matter? His tone made me look up. I'd finally broken through his carefully composed mask. His face was incredulous, with just a hint of anger that I had feared. No, I said softly. It doesn't matter to me what you are. A hard, mocking edge entered his voice. You don't care if I'm a monster? If I'm not human? No. He was silent, staring straight ahead. His voice was bleak and cold. You're angry, I sighed. I shouldn't have said anything. No, he said, but his tone was as hard as his face. I'd rather know what you're thinking, even if what you're thinking is insane. So I'm wrong again, I challenged. That's not what I'm referring to. It doesn't matter. He quoted, gritting his teeth together. I'm right, I gasped. Does it matter? I took a deep breath. Not really, I paused, but I am curious. My voice at least was composed. He was suddenly resigned. What are you curious about? How old are you?
What is this non-conversation?
This is like my worst nightmare of conversations. It's so shallow. These are the conversations that give me like nausea. How old are you? 17. He answered promptly. And how long have you been 17? His lips twitched as he stared at the road. A while.
Chris Hansen would like to talk to this man.
He admitted at last. Okay, I smiled, pleased that he was still being honest with me. He stared at me with watchful eyes, much as he'd done before when he was worried I would go into shock. I smiled wider in encouragement, and he frowned. Don't laugh, but how can you come out during the daytime? He laughed anyway. It's a myth. Burned by the sun? Myth. Sleeping in coffins? Myth.
It's all a myth because it's not sexy.
He hesitated for a moment, and a peculiar tone entered his voice. I can't sleep. It took me a minute to absorb that. At all? Never. He said, his voice nearly inaudible. He turned to look at me with a wistful expression. The golden eyes held mine, and I lost my train of thought. I stared at him until he looked away. You haven't asked me the most important question yet. His voice was hard now, and when he looked at me, his eyes were cold. I blinked, still dazed. Which one is that? You aren't concerned about my diet? He asked sarcastically. Oh, I murmured. That. Yes, that. Stop. His voice was bleak. Don't you want to know if I drink blood?
I assume you do.
I flinched. Well, Jacob said something about that. What did Jacob say? He asked flatly. He said you didn't hunt people. He said your family wasn't supposed to be dangerous because you only hunted animals. He said we weren't dangerous. His voice was skeptical. Not exactly. He said you were supposed to be dangerous, but the Quillettes still didn't want you on their land, just in case. I looked forward, but I couldn't tell if he was watching the road or not. So was he right about not hunting people? I tried to keep my voice as even as possible. The Quillettes have a long memory, he whispered.
How the hell would I know?
I took it as a confirmation. Don't let that make you complacent, though, he warned me. They're right to keep their distance from us. We are still dangerous. I don't understand. We try, he explained slowly. We're usually very good at what we do, but sometimes we make mistakes. Me, for example, allowing myself to be alone with you. This was a mistake?
Sometimes you take a bite of a cat and you're like, oh no, that's actually a human being.
This was a mistake? I heard the sadness in my voice, but I didn't know if he could as well. A very dangerous one, he murmured. We were both silent then. I watched the headlights twist the curves of the road. They moved too fast. It didn't look real. It was like a video game. I was aware of time slipping away so quickly, like the black road beneath us. And I was hideously afraid that I would never have another chance to be with him like this again. Openly, the walls between us gone for once. His words hinted at the end, and I recoiled from the idea. I couldn't waste 1 minute that I had with him. Tell me more, I asked, desperately not caring what he said, just so I could hear his voice again. He looked at me quickly, startled by the change in my tone. What more do you want? Tell me why you hunt animals instead of people, I suggested, my voice still tinged with desperation. I realized my eyes were wet, and I fought against the grief that was trying to overpower me. I don't want to be a monster. His voice was very low. But animals aren't enough. He paused. I can't be sure, of course, but I'd compare it to living on tofu and soy milk. We call ourselves vegetarians. Our little inside joke. It doesn't completely satiate the hunger, or rather, thirst, but it keeps us strong enough to resist. Most of the time. Sometimes, it's more difficult than others. It is very difficult for you now? I asked. Yes. But you're not hungry now, I said confidently, stating, not asking. Why do you think that? Your eyes. I told you I had a theory. I've noticed that people, men in particular, are crabbier when they're hungry. Men!
It's always men.
He chuckled. You are observant, aren't you? I didn't answer. I just listened to the sound of his laugh, committing it to memory. Were you hunting this weekend? With Emmett? I asked when he was quiet again. Yes. He paused for a second as if deciding whether or not to say something. I didn't want to leave, but it was necessary. It's a bit easier to be around you when I'm not thirsty. Why didn't you want to leave? It makes me anxious to be away from you. His eyes were gentle but intense, and they seemed to be making my bones turn soft.
Ew.
My bones!
That's my balls.
My bones. I wasn't joking when I asked you to try not to fall in the ocean or get run over last Thursday. I was distracted all weekend worrying about you. And after what happened tonight, I'm surprised that you did make it through the whole weekend unscathed.
Do you think she's a toddler? Like, it's kind of gross that you have romantic intentions towards somebody that you don't think can, like, walk and breathe at the same time.
He shook his head. Well, not totally unscathed, he added. What? Your hands, he reminded me. I looked down at my palms at the almost healed scrapes on the heels of my hands. His eyes missed nothing.
What is that?
I don't know. I fell, I sighed. That's what I thought. His lips curved at the corner. I suppose being you, it could have been much worse, and that possibility tormented me the entire time I was away. It was a very long 3 days. I really got on Emmett's nerves. He smiled ruefully at me.
My nerves.
3 days? Didn't you just get back today? No, we got back Sunday. Then why weren't any of you at school? I was frustrated, almost angry as I thought about how much disappointment I had suffered because of his absence. Bella, this isn't healthy.
Yeah, like, he's allowed not to come to school.
Well, you asked if the sun hurt me, and it doesn't. But I can't go out in the sunlight, at least not where anyone can see. Why? I'll show you sometime, he promised. I thought about it for a moment.
Like, he literally could, though.
Yeah.
People would just assume he's wearing glitter.
They would just be like, ah, look at that guy. He is flamboyant.
Yeah.
You might have called me, I decided. He was puzzled, but I knew you were safe. But I didn't know that you were. I hesitated, dropping my eyes. What? His velvety voice was compelling. I didn't like it. Not seeing you. It made me anxious, too. I blushed to be saying this out loud. He was quiet. I glanced up, apprehensive, and saw that his expression was pained. Ah, he groaned quietly. This is wrong. I couldn't understand his response. What did I say? Don't you see, Bella? It's one thing to make me, myself, miserable, but a wholly other thing for you to be so involved. I turned his anguished eyes to the road. Or he turned his anguished eyes to the road. His words flowing almost too fast for me to understand. I don't want to hear that you feel that way. His voice was low but urgent. His words cut me. It's wrong. It's not safe. I'm dangerous, Bella. Please grasp that.
Ugh.
No. I tried very hard not to look like a sulky child. I'm serious, he growled. So am I. I told you it doesn't matter what you are. It's too late. His voice whipped out low and harsh. Never say that. I bit my lip and was glad he couldn't know how much that hurt. I stared out at the road. We must be close now. He was driving so fast. What are you thinking? He asked. His voice was still raw. I just shook my head, not sure if I could speak. I could feel his gaze on my face, but I kept my eyes forward. Are you crying? He sounded appalled. I hadn't realized the moisture in my eyes had brimmed over. I quickly rubbed my hand across my cheek, and sure enough, traitor tears were there, betraying me. Traitor tears were there, betraying me.
Kind of redundant, but okay.
No, I said, my voice cracking. I saw him reach towards me hesitantly with his right hand, but then he stopped and placed it slowly back on the steering wheel. I'm sorry. His voice burned with regret. I knew he wasn't just apologizing for the words that had upset me. The darkness slipped by us in silence. Tell me something, he asked after a minute, and I could hear him struggle to use the lighter tone. Yes? What were you thinking tonight, just before I came around the corner? I couldn't understand your expression. You didn't look that scared. You looked like you were concentrating very hard on something. I was trying to remember how to incapacitate an attacker. You know, self-defense. I was going to smash his nose into his brain. I thought of the dark-haired man with a surge of hate. You were going to fight them? This upset him. Didn't you think about running? I fall down a lot when I run, I admitted. What about screaming for help?
But I can fight.
But I can fight. What about screaming for help? I was getting to that part. He shook his head. You were right. I'm definitely fighting fate trying to keep you alive. I sighed. We were slowly passing into the boundaries of Forks. It had taken less than 20 minutes. Will I see you tomorrow? I demanded. Yes. I have a paper due. He smiled. I'll save you a seat at lunch, though. It was silly, after everything we'd been through tonight, how that little promise sent flutters through my stomach and made me unable to speak. We were in front of Charlie's house. The lights were on. My truck was in its place. Everything was utterly normal. It was like waking from a dream. He stopped the car, but I didn't move. Do you promise to be there tomorrow? I promise. I considered that for a moment, then nodded. I pulled his jacket off, taking one last sniff. You can keep it. You don't have a jacket for tomorrow, he reminded him.
I don't want it back.
You can keep it. I handed it back to him. I don't want to have to explain it to Charlie. Oh, right. He grinned. I hesitated, my hand on the door handle trying to prolong the moment. Bella, he asked in a different tone, serious but hesitant. Yes? I turned back to him too eagerly. Will you promise me something? Yes, I said and instantly regretted my unconditional agreement. What if he asked me to stay away from him? I couldn't keep that promise. Bella, don't go into the woods alone. I stared at him in blank confusion. Why? He frowned and his eyes were tight as he stared past me out the window. I'm not always the most dangerous thing out there. Let's leave it at that.
No, you should probably tell her she's supposed to be worried about something.
I shuddered at the sudden bleakness in his voice, but I was relieved. This, at least, was an easy promise to honor. Whatever you say. I'll see you tomorrow. He sighed, and I knew he wanted me to leave. Tomorrow, then,
so bipolar.
I opened the door unwillingly. Bella. I turned and he was leaning towards me. His pale, glorious face just inches from mine. My heart stopped beating. Sleep well, he said, his voice blew in my face, stunning me.
She's like, oh, Edward's breath smells so bad.
Oh, I spilled something. Can you throw me a thing? Intermission on the last 5 pages of this chapter. Perhaps I have had too many shots.
You've had like
I know, I've had 2 since I've started reading.
Oh, okay.
So that's like 4. But sake is heart healthy, so it's okay. Sleep well, Bella. His breath blew in my face, stunning me. It was the quite same exquisite scent that clung to my jacket, but in a more concentrated form.
So is he just licking his jacket?
I blinked, thoroughly dazed. He leaned away. I was unable to move until my brain had somewhat unscrambled itself. Then I stepped out of the car awkwardly, having to use the frame for support. I thought I heard him chuckle, but the sound was too quiet for me to be certain. He waited till I had stumbled to the front door, and then I heard his engine quietly rev. I turned to watch the silver car disappear around the corner. I realized then it was very cold. I reached for the key mechanically, unlocking the door and stepping inside. Charlie called from the living room. Bella? Yeah, Dad, it's me. I walked in to see him. He was watching a baseball game. You're home early? Am I? I was surprised. It's not even 8 yet. Did you girls have fun? Yeah, it was lots of fun. My head was spinning as I tried to remember all the way back to the girls' night that we had planned. They both found dresses. Are you alright? I'm just tired. I did a lot of walking. Maybe you should go lie down. He sounded concerned. I wondered what my face looked like. I'm just gonna call Jessica first. Weren't you just with her? He asked, surprised. Yeah, but I left my jacket in her car. I want to make sure she brings it tomorrow. Well, why don't you give her a chance to get home first? Right, I agreed. I went to the kitchen and fell, exhausted, into a chair. I was really dizzy. I wondered if I was going into shock after all. Get a grip, I told myself.
Yeah, really.
The phone rang suddenly, startling me. I yanked it off the hook. Hello? I asked breathlessly. What the fuck, Bella? Hello?
Are you okay?
Bella?
You need a squad car?
Hey, Jess, I was just gonna call you. You made it home. Her voice was relieved and surprised. Yeah, I left my jacket in your car. Could you bring it to me tomorrow? Sure, but tell me what happened, she demanded. Tomorrow, in Trig, okay? She caught on quickly. Oh, your dad's there. Yes, that's right. Okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow then. Bye. I could hear the impatience in her voice. Bye, Jess. I walked up the stairs slowly, a heavy stupor clouding my mind. I went through the motions of getting ready for bed without paying attention to what I was doing. It wasn't until I was in the shower, the water too hot and burning my skin, that I realized I was freezing. I shuddered violently for several minutes before the steaming spray could finally relax my rigid muscles. Then I stood, this is ridiculous, then I stood in the shower, too tired to move, until the hot water ran out.
Well, isn't it like he always keeps it cold in his car because it's not weird that his nasty hands are cold.
Yeah. I stumbled out, wrapping myself securely in a towel, trying to hold the heat from the water in so the aching shivers wouldn't return. I dressed for bed swiftly and climbed under my quilt, curling into a ball, hugging myself to keep warm.
But, like, stupid daily stuff is always paragraphs long.
Yeah, Bella has hypothermia. A few small shudders trembled through me. My mind still swirled dizzily, full of images I couldn't understand, and some I fought to repress. Nothing seemed clear at first, but as I fell gradually closer to unconsciousness, a few certainties became evident. About 3 things I was absolutely positive.
There it is.
Yeah, here it comes. First, Edward was a vampire. Second,
He said he was.
there was a part of him, and I didn't know how potent that part might be, that thirsted for my blood. And third, I was unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him. And that is the end of chapter 9. And it ends with the text blurb on the back of the cover. She's very proud of that paragraph.
Yeah, she is.